Okay. Are you going to start?
Yeah, I'll start us off. I'm Brian Jennings, Head of Adult Services at New City Library. And here with me is Nancy Moskowitz, who orders, among other things, all of our mysteries for the library. So today we're doing another series on what's new and what we're reading in mystery. And Nancy is going to guide us through today's session. Again, if you have questions, you can post them in the chat or the Q&A, and we'll watch that. And then at the end, we'll open it up and give people a chance to share with us what they're reading. So Nancy, I'll just
okay. You got the slides. Okay, let's
control
go
the
to
slides here.
Okay, so the first thing.
There we go.
Okay, the first question I want to pose is, what is a mystery novel? And that sounds simple. It's fiction that follows a crime from when it is committed to when it is solved. So that's pretty straightforward. But next slide. These are the different kinds of mysteries, and this is not even an exhaustive list. There's probably a lot more kinds of mysteries than these, but this shows you that mysteries go through a lot of different permutations. There's all sorts of mysteries. Some of them we don't even consider mysteries in terms of where they are in the library. Domestic thrillers, unreliable narrators, we tend to put those in regular fiction. But you can see there's probably never even thought of how many different kinds of mysteries there are, but there's lots of them. So there should be something for everybody. Okay, next slide.
Do we want to do our poll?
Oh, yeah, we could launch our poll. Okay, here, we're gonna ask a question and just click on the answer. Does everyone see that?
Basically, we're asking you what kind of mysteries you might enjoy, just so we can get a sense of.
You could vote for more than one. Serial killer. Okay. Everybody voted. Okay.
Okay, so historical, psychological.
Okay, so it looks like people like a little bit of everything. Okay. 16. Okay, so let me. That's the you can view that.
I click off of that, Nancy?
Yes. Yeah, we're just showing people. Everyone voted so we can share the results. And then when we're ready to go on, we'll stop sharing. Did everyone get a good look? Okay.
There it is. Okay.
All right, so that gives you an idea. Everybody likes something different. And obviously I had to cut it down, the list to 3 and then an other. Okay, so recommended mysteries. These are mysteries that I have read recently, and Brian, I think, threw in one too. And so let's get started. We'll tell you what we think. Maybe you'll pick up some ideas. My phone's ringing. Okay, so let's go to the next one. Okay, Brian.
So this is one of my favorite mysteries, is Motherless Brooklyn by Jonathan Lethem. It's not a new book, but it's not your average mystery. It's kind of a classic detective noir with a twist. And that twist is that the protagonist, Lionel Esrog, is an orphan, thus the motherless part, turned detective with Tourette's. So part of the story is taking place just like any other mystery story, but the interesting part is he's struggling with these words in his head, and his Tourette's, and he's trying to rein that in without blurting things out, which he almost always inevitably does. So it's a good New York book. Jonathan Lethem writes good New York books, at least the handful that I've read. Also Chronic City he wrote, which was pretty good. And if you've already read Motherless Brooklyn, or if you read it and you want something else, he also wrote a book called The Feral Detective, about a woman who's in New York and goes west and meets this feral detective. And then in the last one of these sessions that we did, we talked about our favorite books of 2020. And James McBride's Deacon King Kong is another that I would say is somewhat similar, a New York kind of noir detective story. So that's my pick.
Okay, well, mine is very different. The Thursday Murder Club by Richard Osman. It's a very gentle, cozy, traditional murder mystery. It takes place in kind of a posh retirement community in England. There are 4 friends who join together into the Thursday Murder Club, where they try and solve cold cases, which they enjoy doing. But then they find that a real murder has been committed practically on their doorstep. So they band together, they befriend 2 police officers, and they decide they're going to solve this case. It's a very sweet, gentle mystery. You don't really think sweet and gentle as mysteries, but mysteries can be very sweet and gentle. It was charming. I love the characters, and it was a very kind of a soothing read. So if you don't want your heart rate to get up too high, read the Thursday Murder Club. It's very good. It was a big bestseller in Britain, by the way. Okay, next. Here's a very opposite book, The Bloodline by Jess Lurie. Jess Lurie has written other mysteries. I had never read anything by her before, but it sounded very interesting. And when I read this book, I said, this is like Rosemary's Baby mixed in with Stepford Wives, and it is. In a nutshell, a pregnant woman and her boyfriend moved to his little town where he grew up. It's a very idyllic town. It's in the early 60s. They're not married, but they have to pretend that they did get married already. Otherwise, it would be a big scandal. As she gets to know the people in the town, she realizes there's something definitely off about them. They're very nosy. They seem to know everything about her life. And there's a very creepy club called the Mothers and Fathers Club. So she has a real sense of disquiet, which you feel also. You want her to get the heck out of there. And I really did enjoy this book. If you want a mystery with a little scare tactic in it, read this. It'll keep you up. So very enjoyable, different, but enjoyable. Okay, next. Oh, The Mystery of Mrs Christie by Marie Benedict. Marie Benedict may be a familiar sounding author. She's written other fiction books. She's wrote about Hedy Lamarr and the other Mrs. Einstein. But in this book, she takes on Agatha Christie. And as I said here, the greatest mystery of Agatha Christie's life was the one she would never talk about. And that's when she disappeared for 11 days in 1926. When she was found after the 11 days, she claimed she had amnesia. But nobody ever knows. She would never talk about it. She left it out of her autobiography. The one thing that is known is that when she disappeared, just before she disappeared, her husband told her he was leaving her for another woman. And maybe that set her off. So Marie Benedict takes 2 timelines, one from when Agatha met her love of her life, Archie, and also takes another timeline from when the disappearance happened. She moves backwards with one and forward with the other until they meet. And I thought that the attempt that she made to explain this was very plausible. I did enjoy this book. It's very much a traditional mystery with a rather untraditional narrative. So if you're at all interested in Agatha Christie, you might want to read this.
So this is based on a true.
Yes, it
but
really happened.
It's historical fiction in a sense.
Yes. Yeah, this is a mystery. Nobody died. There was a disappearance. Not every mystery is about a murder. Sometimes it's about a kidnapping, a disappearance, a secret. We just read a mystery a few months ago that was not about a murder. It was about poison pen letters. So keep that in mind. Most of them are about murders, but not always. Most mysteries. Okay, next. Okay, Hot to Trot by MC Beaton. MC Beaton is probably familiar to anyone who reads mysteries. She has two series. One is the Agatha Raisin, and the other is the Hamish Macbeth. Hamish Macbeth was the one she wrote first. And before she wrote mysteries, she wrote romances under her name of Marion Chesney. The Agatha Raisin series, a lot of people don't like it because they don't like Agatha, because she's very abrasive and not very likable. But I don't know whether you have to like the character in order to like a series or to like a book. I found that Agatha is very flawed, but I feel sorry for her, and I think she's aware of her inadequacies, so that makes her kind of vulnerable. And this book is the 31st installment, and Miss Chesney, who's I think died at 83, she knew she was failing, and so she asked her friend to help her finish the book, which he did. She approved of it, and she died a few weeks after it was finished. And I wasn't sure whether this was going to continue. I did a little research, and Rod Green, who's R.W. Green, is going to continue both series. So if you do like this series or the Hamish Macbeth, you could cheer up because it will still continue, just like the Parker, Robert B. Parker, and some other authors who keep writing even though they're dead. Okay, next. Did we miss something? Okay, In the Garden of Spite. I'm kind of embarrassed to say how much I like this book because it's about a serial killer, and it's based on a true serial killer. Belle Gunness was one of the first and very successful serial killers. She killed probably between 14 and 40 people. The author, Camilla Bruce, is Norwegian, and she grew up in the same area where Belle Gunness is from. Not much is known about Belle, but in her life in Norway, but she gives her a very wretched early life, which may explain why she hated men so much and why she was so enraged all the time, which unfortunately she channeled into killing. I really did enjoy this book. There's two narratives. There's Belle, the killer, and her older sister Nellie, who is very protective of Belle, pretends not to see alarming things because she doesn't want her sister to get into trouble. But she's a very fascinating character, and there's not much known about her. I don't want to give too much away, but it is grisly, and if you're a little squeamish, some of the scenes are a little much, but I really enjoyed this book. I thought it was lots of fun.
What was the time period on this, Nancy?
Oh, yeah. She came to the United States in 1881. And so it was like the 1890s, early 1900s. It also has a very good picture of what it was like for immigrants. It takes place in Chicago, what it was like to be an immigrant, and how the immigrants kind of replicated their lives from where they came from. All the people from Norway lived together in Norway housing. Even though Sweden is their neighbor, they didn't mix with the Swedes. They just, Norway people just stuck with the Norway people. I really enjoyed this book, unfortunately, maybe for my mental health, but it was fun. It's a nice look into a very troubled mind. I think it also gives you, if not sympathy for her, but a little understanding in the beginning, and then of why she had so many issues.
A lot of Norwegians in Old New City.
Oh, they probably would not want to claim her. If you do go to LaPorte, Indiana, which is where she did a lot of her killing, there is a museum, and you can maybe tour the grounds of where she buried her victims. But yeah, she was kind of a very sad person, but a very entertaining book nonetheless. Okay, forthcoming mysteries. We're going to see what's coming next. Okay, The Survivors by Jane Harper. It came out on this past Tuesday. I have read everything by her. This is her fourth novel, and it takes place this time in a tiny town in Tasmania. Her other books, for example, The Dry, takes place in the outback in Australia, and she has such a knack for making you really feel what the setting is like. And this one I'm sure will be just as good. And it also has that kind of familiar plot device where somebody comes back to their hometown and all these long buried secrets are dredged up. So in this case, Kieran comes back to help his elderly parents. They need some help. He comes back. His brother had been killed, and that's the start of all these things, being disruptive. So I'm sure this is going to be just as good as her others. If you haven't read anything by her, she doesn't write series, so you can read any of them. We read The Dry in our mystery group, so I really recommend her. She's just such an entertaining author. Okay, next. Oh, Hide in Place by Amelia Neymark. This book is going to be fun to read because it takes place in our own county. The author actually emailed me and asked me if I would consider buying her book. And I checked, and I had already ordered her book because it got very good reviews. What it's about is an undercover cop, a female cop, flees the city. She moves to wonderful Rockland County. She's very happy here, but then her son vanishes, and she decides she's going to have to investigate. And it could have something to do with the Russian mob. But I think it's always fun to read a book set in our own county. If any of you have read, what's the Mary Beth Keane's?
Ask Again, yes.
Ask Again, yes. That took place here. If you go back, Romance Reader by Pearl Abraham took place here. I love books that take place in our area. I think it's fun to try and figure out. The town that this book takes place in is called Sylvan, and the author said it's not unlike New City, but New City is kind of a dull name. Sylvan sounds very nice.
So does the author live in New City?
She lives in the Hudson Valley.
Oh, she just.
But I don't know where she lives. I didn't check to see if she has a library card. But she also said that if we want to do this book for investigating mystery, she would be very happy to come and sit in with us and give us some insights, which is that's always a lot of fun. So I hope that you will put this on your to be read list and support our local author here. All right, next. Okay, Black Widows by Kate Quinn. Kate Quinn is also known as C.S. Quinn. She writes historical mysteries. She's a British author. This one's coming out on Tuesday. I happen to have read this one in a pre-publication form. Librarians can often get books that have before they're published. They used to be called advanced reader's copy, and they would be in print. Now they're usually ebooks. It's just easier to get them that way. So I did read this because it was about a polygamist, and I love reading books about kind of hidden societies, closed societies. This book, Blake Nelson has 3 wives, 3 unhappy wives, and he is found brutalized, mutilated, and murdered. And of course, because they live, just the 4 of them on this little compound in the middle of nowhere, suspicion falls on all 3 of the wives. The wives don't like each other, don't trust each other, and they don't really get along all that well. But when they're accused of murder, they try to figure out what happened. The story is told from the viewpoints of all of the 3 wives. And I found this really interesting. I just really enjoyed this book. So that's coming out on Tuesday. I did find a Britishism, which I hope they fix. They're talking about Ritz crackers, but they called them Ritz biscuits. So that was a little mistake I found, but I did like the book. Okay, Fatal Lies by Charles Todd's coming out February 16th. This is one of my favorite series. I really enjoy this series. Inspector Ian Rutledge is a veteran of World War I. He was an officer. He ordered the execution of one of his men for disobeying orders and not participating in an attack that everyone knew was futile. So he is haunted by this event in more ways than one. And he lives a very lonely life. No one really gets close to him or likes him. He is based in London, but in all the books, he seems to be sent all over England to figure out the murders that no one else can figure out. And if you look at this one, he's sent to investigate the death of an unknown man. You can't even begin to imagine how he's going to do this, but he will. He will figure it out. I really enjoy this series. This is the 23rd installment. I would, if I was going to start this series, I would start from the beginning because I think it's important to see how he changes over the years, what's happened to him, how he comes to terms with his guilt. And it's just a really original premise. And it's written by actually a mother and a son. There is no Charles Todd. And Charles Todd, mother and son, also write the Bess Crawford mysteries, which is about a World War I nurse, which I know one of my colleagues likes that series even better than this one. So I would recommend it, and I know I'm going to be putting this on hold. Okay. Quiet in Her Bones by Nalini Singh. That's coming out on February 24th. I'm not familiar with this author, but the premise sounds really interesting. If you look at what I've written about it, a woman who was disappeared 10 years earlier, now her remains have been found, and the son is going to find out. I don't know where the police are in this book, but the son is determined to discover what happened. She lived in this very exclusive cul-de-sac, and he knows, he's just feels that people, his neighbors, know more than they've ever admitted. So he's going to find out what happened to his mom and maybe that $250,000. This author has mostly written romance before. So she's another one like MC Beaton, went from romance to mysteries. Okay, that's Quiet in Her Bones. Winter Kill, here's the really cold book. This is the 6th of the Deadly Iceland series by Ragnar Jonasson. It's coming out on March 1st. It's a continuing character, Ari Thor, and this is a real heart pounder. He's got to solve the murder of this young 19-year-old girl. At the same time, a violent blizzard is bearing down on Iceland. They're probably all freezing. And because of, once the blizzard hits, they're going to be cut off and they won't be able to do anything. So he feels this time crunch. Jonasson, the Scandinavian mysteries were very, very popular for a while. After Stig Larsson, they all started coming out. And they have usually they have a very gloomy tone. And usually the main character has a lot of problems, a lot of baggage. He's an alcoholic or he's divorced. He's usually very morose. This book is called Chilly, Dark, and Claustrophobic. So if that appeals to you, read this in front of with a warm drink and a hot fire, and just be glad you're not out in an Icelandic blizzard.
We'll have to see if all the snow's melted by the time this book is released.
Yeah, I don't think so. I think we're going to feel like we're in Iceland. Okay, so that's Winter Kill. Oh, this is another one of my favorite authors, C.J. Box, and the new one is called Dark Sky. It's coming out on March 2nd. If you haven't read this series, Game Warden Joe Pickett is just such a nice guy. He's got a lovely wife. He's happily married. He's got 3 daughters. He's got a dog. And unfortunately, he gets sucked into not just dealing with animals, but dealing with crimes involving human beings. And he gets into a lot of trouble with his supervisors because he's always totaling all the trucks they give him. In this case, the governor has kind of forced him to accompany this tech baron on a hunting trip. While they're on their way, they lose their horses, their guns, their communication, and they are being pursued by a revenge-crazed maniac. So they have nothing to defend themselves with and no way to get help. But luckily, Joe's daughter and his resourceful friend Nate are coming to rescue him. If you've read any of these books, you're probably familiar with Nate Romanowski, who Joe is so average and Nate is so extraordinary. He's kind of like a Jack Reacher type of guy, is that he's a loner. He's completely resourceful. He can figure his way out of anything, and he kind of lives below the law. So I'm really looking forward to this book. It looks exciting. And CJ Box has also written some very good standalones. So if you could read anything by him, you really should grab it. I just love him. And Sally Pellegrini, who used to work at the library, was the one who turned me on to him. And she told me she once wrote him this long email telling her how much she likes his books. And he wrote her back. He said, thanks. So he's a little laconic, but I just love the books. They're so good. Okay. This is another new first novel by Ava Barry called Wind Hall, coming out on March 2nd. And it sounds like a lot of fun. There's really two time periods. There's the golden age of Hollywood, where there's this actress, Eleanor Hayes, who's murdered. Her lover and director, Theo Langley, has been accused of it, but he was let off on a technicality and disappeared. No one ever knew what happened to him. This young journalist, Max Haley, decides he's going to close the case. He's going to go and find out what happened. And in the meantime, while he's discovering, he finds out there's this movie that's never been released, and he thinks that might hold the key to this case. This is a really fun book, I believe. I haven't read it, obviously, but it looks like it could be a lot of fun. There's a lot of golden age Hollywood parties and lavish lifestyles. So it sounds like a real treat. I'm looking forward to this. It's a first novel. The author is a young Australian woman. So let's put this on your to be read list again. It sounds good. All right. Now this, some of you may know this author, Julian Simons, The Progress of a Crime. This was the British Crime Library series has reprinted this. They've been reprinting a lot of famous novels that have kind of fallen out of public eye. This is a reprint by Julian Simons. When I first started as a librarian in the early 80s, his books were still on the shelf and people read him. And then he died in 1994 and he kind of fell off the radar. A lot of people don't know him, and the books probably aren't in most libraries because they've probably been discarded or fallen apart. But he has a very good eye for problems. In this case, he talks about juvenile delinquency, and his plotting is superb. So I think what will happen if this book does well, more of his books will be reprinted. But I'm really looking forward to this one. It sounds like a real winner. So if you haven't read anything by him, pick this one up. All right. Oh, Not Dark Yet by Peter Robinson. It's coming out on March 16th. He is also one of my favorites. Peter Robinson is from Yorkshire, and he lives in Canada now, but this one is set in Yorkshire. DCI Alan Banks. I've been reading them from the first one, and I am convinced that he is one of the best practitioners of the British police procedurals, which I've always loved. A lot of people who had done them are not writing anymore. They passed away, and this is a wonderful tradition that has continued, and he's one of the best. If Stephen King and I are both big fans. I would start from the beginning with this series because you want to see what happens in Alan Banks's life. He starts off, he's a young married man, he's got 2 little kids, and it continues as life changes, the world changes. And I just think that it's a real treat to read anything by him. I'm really looking forward to this one. So keep that on your list also. Not Dark Yet. Okay, this one is a debut novel, Saving Grace by Debbie Babbitt, coming out March 16th. Mary Lou is the new and the first female sheriff of this little town in Arkansas. It's her hometown. She's left, but she comes back as the sheriff. And 24 years ago, her two girlfriends disappeared separately. No one's ever seen them again. And now it's happening again. Now, poor Mary Lou, she's facing a lot of resistance. People don't like someone coming back to town. People don't respect her because she's female. And to make it worse, she has a sixth grade daughter. So I think this should be a really good book. It's got that Southern Gothic feel, and she has to solve the old mystery in order to solve the new. So this should be a real challenge for her, and I think it sounds very enjoyable. Okay, this is a pretty well-known series called the Gaslight series, Murder on Wall Street by Victoria Thompson, coming out April 27th. If anyone has read this series, Sarah Brandt Malloy was an upper-class woman who became a midwife to the poor people in New York City. Along the way, she solves crime. She takes a liking to one of the police officers. She ends up marrying to Frank, her detective husband, and she becomes involved in this case involving a wealthy society banker. Probably the favorite thing about these mysteries is the Gilded Age setting, because she does it so well that it's just so enjoyable. All of her books take place around New York City, and she also started another series called Counterfeit Lady, which also takes place in New York City. So if you like Victoria Thompson or you've never read her, give this a try. I think you'll find it very worthwhile. And I don't know if we have any others. Okay. Okay, so we're going to be doing this again on March 5th at 4 o'clock, but it'll be new fiction with me again. And I promise I'll have some good titles for you. And then
May 7th, I'm going to be with Mary Phillips talking about young adult books. So we haven't had Mary on here yet. She's the teen librarian and very well read. So that should be interesting session. Also, Nancy, you might point out for folks that are on this call, some of them may be your people who go to investigating mysteries, but some may not know about your book club. Tell us about the Investigating Mysteries Mystery Book Club.
Yes, I would be happy to. Investigating Mysteries, we started meeting in September of 2005 in person. We meet the fourth Monday of the month at 7 o'clock. Now, obviously, we have to do it on Zoom, and but we still have good meetings. I try to mix up the books so that we read different things. In fact, this month, on February 25th, we'll be reading this book, which is Closed Casket by Sophie Hannah.
I think it must be February 22nd.
I'm sorry, I have a 22nd. I have a mental block against that. It's the 22nd, yes. The 25th is when we met in January. Yeah, February 22nd, and we're going to be reading Closed Casket by Sophie Hannah, who was awarded the honor of continuing on with Agatha Christie book, Sophie Hannah. I didn't like the first one too much, but I really am enjoying this one. It's lots of fun. In fact, I look forward to going back to reading it. So what you do is, if you want to come, and we're always happy to have new members, just go to the events calendar, click on February 22nd, and you'll see the listing. Then you can register, and you'll be sent a link in a few minutes after you register. And then the day, which will be the link to the Zoom meeting, and then the day before you'll get another link so that you can, you'll be sure to join us. The books are available at the library, or if you prefer to read them on an ebook, they're available at Hoopla.
I'm showing the
22nd.
catalog sign up. And we have a question here from Peter too that we'll have to get to.
Okay.
But this is the
sign up
for the next, which everybody signed up for this, so people are probably aware of that.
Yeah.
On the Q&A, we have a question about a book. Peter's asking if we're ordering After Midnight, Tales from the Graveyard Shift. That sound familiar, or should I send that to you?
Yeah, it doesn't sound familiar. I don't know whether that's a horror or a mystery. I can't tell from the title. If anyone does have a suggestion, and if it's something I can get, I'm almost always happy to get something, unless it's something we can't get, if it's out of print. But we're all of us are very open to suggestions.
Yeah,
In fact,
under how do I?
Yeah, purchase requests.
Hold, renew, or request purchase of an item.
Yeah, that's the best way to get this to us, because Brian will give it to the librarian involved. In fact, somebody asked me for a Jess Laurie book the other day, the one who wrote Bloodline. And so, yeah, I ordered it. Anyway, write that. I'll just write down. What is it? Tales from. Is it in? Could you just show it to me in the chat? Because let me look at the chat.
I'm going to look that up. And send that to you.
Yeah.
After Midnight, Tales from the Graveyard Shift.
Yeah, sometimes I have I've had a conversation with Karen Ostertag, who buys the horror, and she says that she only considers things a horror genre if they're supernatural beings. So if it's like a grisly murder, that's not supernatural, so that would not be horror. So, for example, The Exorcist would be horror, but Hannibal Lecter would not be horror, even though it's horrible.
I'm going to send this to you afterwards, the After Midnight. Peter's also asking, what is an unreliable narrator mystery?
Oh, okay. Here's one that comes up. Paula Hawkins, The Girl on the Train, where somebody is telling you the story, but you don't realize they're a liar, or you're believing their version of something and it's not true. That's become pretty common. It's not uncommon. And sometimes that'll happen when a book has different narrators. You say, well, who's telling the truth? For the one I just read, the Kate Quinn book, there were three women talking. Who was telling the truth? Was anyone telling the truth? Were they all telling the truth? So it's almost like you don't necessarily believe what you're being told, and you shouldn't believe it, because just be skeptical. But Girl on the Train, I think, was the first one by Paula Hawkins that came out with the unreliable narrator, and people weren't used to it, so that it was very surprising.
Okay, thanks everybody for coming, and enjoy the weekend.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right.